Lesson 27, the rise of absolute monarchy in France. Okay, so let's look into the groundwork for Louis XIV's absolutist policies. This could start with Cardinal Richelieu. He was the chief minister for Louis XIII, a king who's not really got a strong reputation for being a great leader or anything like that. He is the king in, for example, the Three Musketeers. Cardinal Richelieu began a policy of centralization, trying to gain as many powers as possible, give them to the monarchy. And one of the aspects of this was he had a real focus on limiting the political privileges of Huguenots. He wanted to get rid of their ability to fortify their own towns and their relative independence in France. Cardinal Mazarin would take over after Cardinal Richelieu as chief minister, and he would continue these policies of centralization. These pictures here, the one to the bottom, that's Cardinal Mazarin. The one to the right is a kind of dramatic, I think, imagined painting of Cardinal Richelieu at one of the sieges against the Huguenots. I believe it's at actually La Rochelle, the battle at La Rochelle. There was a reaction to all these centralization policies. Early in Louis XIV's reign, there was the Fronde. These were a series of rebellions, widespread rebellions. The Fronde is named after slingshots that kids were using in Paris. This inspired Louis XIV to avoid heavy-handed policies. He attempted to centralize authority, but as he centralized authority to keep the aristocracy from leading more of these kinds of rebellions, he basically let them know that he would make sure and protect and safeguard their social privileges as aristocrats. And he did this partly by working through existing institutions, by working through the local councils, the local parliaments. At the age of 23, Louis XIV finds that Cardinal Mazarin will die in 1661, and now he's going to assume control. He is a very energetic ruler. He will spend hours working with his councils. Ministers will be chosen from families that have long been in royal service, or they come from up-and-coming families that don't have a strong power base of their own, so they can't really be independent of the king. And that should encourage, and did encourage, a great deal of loyalty. Louis XIV usually would discuss informally, he would discuss issues with the parliaments, his local councils, before he acted on an issue. So he would kind of get a sense of what they were willing to go with, what might meet resistance, that kind of thing. There was one conflict concerning this kind of stuff. The Parliament of Paris was weakened. It was a popular move. It had basically a kind of a veto power on laws that affected it, and this was kind of resented, envied by other parliaments. And another thing that he will do is he will rule from his palace at Versailles, and Versailles will be something that is definitely kind of associated very strongly with Louis XIV's rule. Louis XIV proved to be a master at the use of propaganda and shaping his image. He would stress the grandeur of the French crown. He manipulated symbols. For example, at special occasions, he would dress as a Roman emperor. He threw extravagant parties that would demonstrate his royal power, basically showing that, look what I can do, you can't do it. It worked very effectively for him. Here we see some paintings, basically in this kind of exaggerated style, where we see these Roman themes. One painting showing Louis XIV basically take on the role of Jupiter, the king of the gods. Versailles, Louis XIV's palace, that started out as a hunting lodge, a really nice hunting lodge, is the largest secular structure, or was the largest secular structure in Europe. It became his permanent residence in 1682, so it's not like he lived in Versailles his whole life. And the bottom picture is a modern picture of people visiting Versailles. It is, after all, a big tourist attraction. Above you see, to the right, you see the Queen's bedroom, and to the left you see one of the galleries. Nobles stayed at Versailles. It was expensive, and the ones who could afford it, it took away some of their money, which they could have been using to maybe build their own army and cause problems for Louis. The ones who couldn't afford it were able to do it because Louis XIV allowed them to, which basically placed them in his debt. Either way, he made these nobles essentially dependent on him. The expense of Versailles was huge. It consumed over half of Louis's annual budget, and life at court was organized around Louis XIV's daily routine. Since power was just concentrated in Louis XIV, basically a noble gained power through the law of propinquity by being close to him so they could whisper something to him. So it was a big deal to be able to be the guy who put his shoes on or something like that. Now some nobles will avoid Versailles because they don't want to get caught in this trap of their wealth draining away and just basically live as country gentlemen. Others couldn't afford it and apparently didn't try to get Louis XIV to help them. Louis would support traditional social structures and privileges. Even though the nobles become dependent on him, he still doesn't do anything to mess with basically the good life that nobles can lead. Now, somebody who justified Louis XIV's rule was his bishop, his tutor, Bossuet. Bossuet would argue that he possessed the divine right of kings to rule, and to support divine right theory of rulership, Bossuet would show examples of Old Testament rulers, and he would point out that popes made similar arguments about not being able to not being needing to answer to anyone else except for God, because God made them the pope. Louis XIV focused his rule on war, religion, and the national economy. So he really focused on those kinds of things. Local institutions were allowed to maintain their own administrative authority, run the show locally, and Louis supported elite social and financial privileges, which would prevent serious challenges to his authority. Since he's not threatening these privileges of the clergy, the First Estate, and the nobles, the Second Estate, represented here, the First Estate with the crucifix and the Second Estate with the sword, they would not challenge his absolute rule. Now, Louis XIV is going to get in a lot of wars in order to protect or enrich France. In the late 1660s, France had more people than any other European country, had a superior administration, a better military, and was more unified. Part of this was because of the efforts of Jean Colbert, a very intelligent economist, who was able to bring in quite a bit of revenue into the French government. And Louis XIV's big goal was to secure the international boundaries of France. So he's worried about the border with the Spanish Netherlands, he was worried about the border with the German states, and also his border with Spain. Remember, the rivalry with the Habsburgs in the Holy Roman Empire and in Spain, it's still going on. And French power, this newfound superiority that France would have, would cause others to form opposing coalitions whenever Louis XIV would move to secure borders. Basically, his idea of securing borders was to expand French territory. The War of Devolution, Marie-Thérèse, his first wife, stood to inherit the Spanish Netherlands, or at least that was his argument. Why? He claimed it was because of this kind of complicated legal argument. He invaded Flanders in the Franche-Comté. Flanders is basically a portion of what is now Belgium, part of the basically Spanish Netherlands, and Franche-Comté over here. If you look at the map to the right, the area that's in red is Franche-Comté. He was repulsed by the Triple Alliance, made up of England, Sweden, and the United Provinces. They signed the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in 1668, and basically he gained some border towns. So he got a little bit of something out of it. The Treaty of Dover, 1670. This is a secret treaty with England versus the Dutch. We've already talked about it. He will invade the Netherlands in 1672, but he will be pushed back by William of Orange, who will become William III of England, and the Holy Roman Emperor, and Spain, and Brandenburg, and even Laurent, which I didn't put on this the notes here. The Peace of Nimjwingen gains more land. He gains more land because of the Peace of Nimjwingen, and this includes the Franche-Comté that we looked at on the map before. Louis's repressive religious policies. Here we see a symbol of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and then below the suppression of the Jansenists, in this case nuns. Louis believed a stable, united France required religious conformity, so he suppressed the Jansenists. And this is a Catholic school of thought. The Jesuit monopoly on education of the French upper class couldn't have helped them, as the Jansenists opposed the Jesuits, which meant the Jesuits were going to oppose the Jansenists. Jansenists. They were inspired by St. Augustine. They opposed Jesuit support for free will. They believed original sin meant works wouldn't work, that you couldn't do good deeds that would amount to enough to overcome original sin. Jansen, the guy who started all this, was a Flemish bishop. He attacked Jesuit teaching as morally lax in a book he called Augustinus, which obviously shows the influence of St. Augustine on him. This was going to influence the Parisian elite. Jansenists lived austerely, very, very much like Puritans. Some of their religious views were very similar to Puritans, although they stayed within the church. And there was opposition to royal authority in the mix for these Jansenists. They were involved in the Fronde, so they're going to make the Jesuits upset. The Jesuits are strongly entrenched in the church, and they're going to make the French king upset because of their assistance to the activities of anti-royalists. Pope Innocent X will declare Jansenism heretical, at least in 5 areas. And you see here a picture of Pope Innocent X. In 1656, Jansen's book, Augustinus, will be banned. In 1660, Louis XIV will enforce the ban in France. And it's kind of important. He's going to close down the Jansenist Port Royal community. That picture again, showing part of that effort of his to close it down. And in 1713, Pope Clement XI will pass the bull Unigenitus, which will condemn Jansenism. So there's a big crackdown on Jansenism. Now, here's the thing. Louis' persecutions are inconsistent with traditional Gallican liberties, and the French church would align more closely with the papacy as a result. He's giving the French church a reason, basically, to respect and identify more with the leadership coming out of Rome than with these ideas of an independent, semi-independent Catholic Church in France. The Parlement of Paris will also reassert itself after Louis XIV passes away. They will essentially ally with Jansenism because Jansenism is seen as another opponent of what they view as royal corruption.